Welcome to the Wild Ohio podcast. This is our first podcast of 2026 and our first podcast live on video.
Yeah. Got the studio set
Got the
up.
sweet sign.
Got the sign. Looks good.
We've come a long way from an empty office in January of 2025
Glorified closet.
to now.
Let's be honest. It was a glorified closet.
We have wallpaper,
Mm-hmm.
a fancy sign. Jordan knows how to put up wallpaper now.
Ish.
Kind of. Sort of. To help us bring in the new year, we have our
Fur biologist.
fur
Kate.
biologist. I was like, mammal biologist?
Yeah.
Yo, I guess technically what is
What
your
is
position?
your official title?
Yeah, I usually say Furbearer biologist, or you could say Furbearer and black bear biologist because they're not a fur bearer, but they're part of my responsibilities.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Yes. So she is bringing us into the new year.
So Kate Dennison.
Kate
is
Dennison.
joining us
That's
and bringing
me.
us into
Yes,
the new
she
year.
is bringing us into the new year. Thank you so much for joining
Yeah,
us.
thanks for being
Thanks
here.
for having me.
Our first time out officially in a podcast studio versus traveling around the state, which is what we did.
Yeah, did a lot of that in the
A
fall.
lot of that in the fall. Katie is talking to us today about a special set of furbearers, specifically ones that have been extirpated from the state of Ohio at one point in their life history and are starting to make their way back.
So we're going to start with the big one on the table, right? Is that where we're going to start?
We're going to start with how Katie became.
Oh, yeah. That's probably a good place to go.
Okay. Yeah, so how I got here?
Yeah, how did you become the fur bearer biologist?
Well, I guess the long version, maybe, or is I probably like a lot of us. I grew up in a very outdoorsy family, so spent a lot of time camping, hiking, boating, fishing, all of that. So loved spending time outdoors, and then generally had an idea of I wanted to work with animals, but I don't think I ever really thought of wildlife biologist as an option. So I ended up going to school for animal science, more focused on domestic animals, and I worked for about 10 years in that field. I worked with dogs, cats, and horses, worked in animal rescue for a while, and then as a vet tech, but eventually got to volunteer some with a wildlife biology department at a national park, and through that I realized that was really what I wanted to be doing. So went back to school, got my master's degree, and that project I was working, and so for my master's degree, my research project was part of a mountain lion research project in West
cool.
Texas. And so that kind of got me into the carnivore world, which is pretty related to the fur bearer world. And from there, I went on to work with the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources in their fur bearer program. And then I came here.
So did you go to grad school in Texas?
Yes.
Nice.
Yeah.
What species? You said Wisconsin?
Yes.
What species were you working with in Wisconsin?
Well, so I worked with all fur bearers, but about half of my job was working on a research project they had going on with bobcats up there. So that was a lot of my time. But I did also get some experience working with wolves and then, yeah, just fur bearer monitoring in general.
So the term fur bearer, that's a term that a lot of us know in our world, but what is that? How is that different from mammals specifically?
Yeah, so the way I usually explain it is that it's not a scientific definition, but more of a legal one. So, I can generally describe it as mammals that were historically harvested for their fur. And so depending on what state you're in, those may be different animals, but it is actually defined in Ohio Administrative Code, and the definition just lists out that these specific species are fur bearers. And really, it's just a way that we can enforce laws for that set of animals. So we have to somewhere define what exactly is a fur bearer.
Yeah, it'll separate them from, because if we said just mammals, a white-tailed deer is a mammal, a squirrel is a mammal. So you're not necessarily pursuing them in the same fashion that you would pursue most of our fur bearer species.
So it's like a commercial use.
Kind of.
In a way.
Yeah, a lot of them have, like Katie said, a historical use. We're going to talk about the beaver today, and that has a huge historical use in North America. So these animals have fur value still today. So these animals have their pelts sent off and can be utilized in making of all sorts of garments. So they have a different place. Whereas a white-tailed deer, most of the time, there are uses for white-tailed deer hides, but value-wise, they're not usually being used in the same capacity that a lot of these species are.
A beaver would
Yeah,
be.
a beaver, a river otter. Yep.
So would it be fair to say that all fur bearers are mammals, but not all mammals are fur bearers? Is
yes.
that a good way to
Yeah.
think about that?
Yeah, that's great.
100%. 100%.
Okay.
So one of the exciting ones that we've got a number of different hides on the table, but I want to start with black bear. So we've got the hide of a black bear right there front and center. So obviously the largest of the fur-bearing species that we have in the state of Ohio, but making pretty strong comeback. Would that be fair to say?
Yes. So first, I'm going to correct you. Black bears are not a fur bearer.
Okay.
They're not included in
There
that
we go.
definition.
We're getting it all worked out.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
this
Keep
is
me
how-
straight.
There
This is how
is
we
no
learn.
reason you need to know that, but
That's why
I
there's
feel
three
the need
hosts.
to correct
No,
it.
no, there's plenty of reasons why.
Yes. So, and I got so wrapped up in that, I missed your question. What was your question? Oh, they're making a comeback.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot more. So, you
Yes.
know, it's soon to be February. I start thinking March, April, May, we see a pretty substantial uptick in black bear sightings.
Yeah.
So I'll give you a chance to talk about that. But you also have been working on a pretty interesting project where we are actually trying to trap black bears and then radio telemetry, put a collar on them, and watch their progress. And I'll tell a quick kind of little funny story, but I was with you and we were working. You were on your computer and just kind of paying no attention, doing your thing. And all of a sudden I just saw this frustration come over her. And I'm like, everything all right over there? She's like, my black bear just went back into PA. We need him to come back into Ohio. I
Yeah.
don't like when he goes back across to PA. So tell us a little bit about that, because it's such an amazing species that was extirpated, now back in, and maybe even give the listenership what does extirpated mean.
I was going to say that. We got to explain.
We
Some
keep-
people
we
won't
keep
want-
saying
yeah.
that. So
Sure. So, I guess the best way to explain extirpated is locally extinct. So they're not extinct from their range as a whole, but they're extinct within the area that we're talking about, in this case, Ohio. So yeah, black bears were extirpated from the state along with many other carnivores. Really, two major things influencing that for most of those species. Unregulated harvest, so people moving into the state, harvesting animals, no regulations in place. And then also loss of forested habitat is a big factor for most of these species. So black bears are in this part of the country, at least, a forest-dependent species. So as Ohio lost its forests, there just wasn't the habitat to support bears anymore. But as you all know, forests have been coming back for a long time now in Ohio. And so we have the habitat now. And then populations in our neighboring states have been growing as their habitat has been coming back as well. And then, of course, now there's protections in place to prevent overharvest of these species. So we've been seeing bears coming into Ohio for a while now, probably consistently since the 1980s, and slowly kind of increasing the number of sightings we get each year. But really in the past maybe 10 years or so, we've seen some what I think are really exciting changes where we're seeing evidence of resident females.
yeah, that's the big one there.
Yeah, so that's
resident
really
females
what we
with
need.
cubs.
Exactly.
Those
yeah.
are Ohio bears.
Yes.
Those are Buckeye
yeah.
bears.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that springtime when I mentioned the uptick in bear sightings, as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong because I've already messed this up once on this recording, but those are juvenile males that are kicking out looking for new territory, new areas. Is that correct?
Yeah, so historically what we've seen is lots of bears showing up in those late spring and summer months, and those are young bears kicked out of their mother's home range and going out to find their own home range. The problem is if they don't find an area with a female, they're probably not going to stick around very long.
Okay.
So most of those bears probably didn't stay in Ohio very long, maybe made a trip through, found some food, but then would eventually head back to where they could find females. But the fact that we now have some resident females in the state, then the males are going to stay here too, and that's where we start to see the population really start to become established.
I have a question about you talked a bit of life history. We had black bears, and then the reasons why we didn't. What time frame was that when black bears pretty much were extirpated from the state? Do we have an idea?
So by the mid 1800s, we think.
So a long time ago, and black bears are now making this recovery. Okay.
Yeah, and I mean they are capable of making really long distance moves. So even throughout the 1800s and 1900s, there would be occasional sightings that would pop up, but really there's no evidence that there were any resident populations.
Okay. So with the males now, or you have the females, that's what the project is about?
Yeah, so that was really the one of the main impetus for the project, was the fact that now we have some resident females in the state, so we want to try and start learning more about them. We started 2 summers ago now, trying to capture bears. In particular, we're trying to target those resident females or males that are in areas where we know we have resident females. And so the first bear that we collared was a male that was in northeast Ohio in Ashtabula County. And then we did also mark a second male. We just put ear tags in, trying to save that collar for a female. Unfortunately, that year, no females went into our trap. We did have 2 females with sows who were in that area, but they just showed no interest in our traps. So,
how do you lure?
I was just going to say, it sounds like Yogi.
I know.
Is much more.
How do you go,
basket?
hey, you want to come over here?
Yeah, so that's been kind of a learning experience with this project of figuring out what our Ohio bears would eat. And so one of the main things we started luring them with is corn, because a lot of our bears are already eating corn out of people's deer feeders or unfortunately out of cornfields.
Yeah.
So and so we kind of took places where they were already eating out of a corn pile and put a trap out there, and then tried to lure them into that trap. And again, it worked with a couple of males. None of the females that first year. We did collar a female this past summer. And then the other thing is, so that kind of gets them to the general area, but then we usually try and put something really extra enticing in the actual trap. So bears really like sweet things, so a lot of times that's donuts, honey buns. We have also tried meat. Beaver meat has a really specific scent to it that a lot of animals are attracted to, so we've tried that. We've tried all sorts of different things.
Interesting. What about a Buckeye candy?
Oh, we could try that. Bears do have kind of the same thing as dogs, where they can't have a lot of chocolate.
Yeah.
But I think a Buckeye would be okay.
for
we could
for
try
the
that.
Ohio specific
Yes.
bears.
Yeah, and definitely the peanut butter.
Yeah.
Peanut butter would be great, and we do put peanut butter in our lures usually.
Yeah, that would lure me.
Yeah,
I love
me
peanut
too.
butter.
The traps that you're talking about, Katie, are big. We're talking about a big culvert style trap, correct?
Yep, that's right. We have a few different types now, but they're all culvert traps, so it is just what it sounds like. It's a big round culvert and then has a door at one end that when the bear goes in and grabs the bait and pulls it, the door closes behind them. Okay. And so we have a couple different types, some that are attached to trailers, others that are a little bit more mobile, but they're pretty big.
Now, if you get a bear, are you alerted pretty immediately?
Yeah, so that's one of the benefits of our newer technology. We've been using cellular trail cameras, and so we use that on our bait sites before we even have a trap set, so that we can know right away if a bear's coming into the bait. And then, of course, once the trap is set, we can see right away if they go in there and get trapped. So
that's nice.
Yeah, it lets us respond a lot quicker, and so that's less stress on the bear, and that's always a good thing.
Nice.
So, in looking at the pelt, long hair, thick, heavy pelt, black bear. A couple of these species that we're going to get into today, you wonder who was in charge of naming them, but they do come in color phases, correct?
Yeah.
So just because it's a black bear doesn't mean that it will be black. So you can see cinnamon, as it's referred to, blonde, and then black, I'd say, were the three main ones that you would expect to see. I've only seen a black bear in the state of Ohio. I don't think I've seen any color phase. Have you?
Yeah, none that I can think of, even in our pictures that have been submitted as sightings. I've only seen black bears. But one interesting thing on we also collared a male bear this fall, and he has a really fairly large, what we'd call a blaze on his chest, a big white
patch.
mark.
Yeah, white patch. Yep.
Yeah, so they can have some interesting markings too.
But kind of a coarse hair, so
Yeah.
gets them through all the seasons.
Well, one of the things
sure.
we take furs to a lot of educational events and normally have a piece of black bear hide. People don't, if they've never seen a black bear up close or personal or even across the field, they don't have a general idea of size. I think a lot of times we think bear and we think great big animals. So what's the average weight of a bear that we might catch here in Ohio?
Yeah, so in Ohio, I mean, again, a lot of the bears that we encounter are going to be those younger males. But in general, if we were looking at adult bears, a female would maybe be 100 to 150 pounds, and then a male maybe 250 to 300 pounds.
Yeah.
They can get quite a bit bigger, and especially in the fall when they're putting on a lot of weight to make it through the winter. But that's going to be the typical that we see.
Yeah, and I tell folks that the hair, especially as you get closer to winter, 3 to 4 inches long, it makes that animal look relatively like coyotes the same way. You see a coyote in the summertime, he looks kind of scrawny. But you see that coyote in December or January, he's all furred out, very fluffy, very big. Bears, same way. They look a lot bigger than they actually are.
Yeah, bears a difficult one to judge the size on. Generally speaking, you use the ears, size of the ears to the size of the head. And then you can, if you've looked at a lot of bears, you can start to pick away at the front legs, length of the front legs. Does the belly sway? Is it low? There's a couple different things. But generally when you see, especially in the state of Ohio, a black bear, I saw a huge black bear today, right?
Yeah.
So, and it's not quite as big, generally speaking, as you would think it is. So, so the species next to it is another one that you've actually, I didn't realize that you had done some work up in Wisconsin, but we've got a bobcat next to it. And speaking of like the coarseness of the black bear and the way that hide feels compared to the bobcat, I mean, that is a soft pelt there. But where does the bobcat name originate from?
Yeah, so
Abby's
they've got
pulling it out.
this nice little short bob tail.
Again, who named these things?
It makes it nice and simple. And so that's consistent. Every bobcat has that. You can also probably maybe see there's a black tip at the end of the tail.
Yep.
And so that's something that, so one of the big ways we track bobcats is, or the main way we track bobcats really at this point in the state is through sightings. And so we get them reported to us and we get pictures sent to us. And every so often it's trying to tell the difference between, is that a bobcat or is that a house cat?
Yeah.
And it gets particularly difficult when you get one of those rare house cats who has a bobtail. And so that looking for that black
throws
tip.
off some people. Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
And when we have those are public, putting in those sightings on our website, right?
Yes,
Which
exactly.
I would probably talk more about, but I would think a lot of those nowadays are trail camera pictures.
Oh, yes. Yeah, lots of trail camera pictures. And then it seems like in just the past couple of years, we're getting more and more like house security camera
really?
pictures as well. So I don't know if that's more people getting those cameras or if bobcats are moving maybe into some of our more suburban areas as well, where
So
there may be more of those out.
We've had bobcats in almost every county in the state. Is that correct?
Almost. I think we're at 86 counties now.
Out of 88.
Yes,
That's
and
pretty good.
that's where they've been confirmed.
Yeah.
So where we actually have a picture or a roadkill or some evidence where we can say that was definitely a bobcat.
So unlike the black bear, then quite a bit more adaptable to habitat differences then, not necessarily bounded by forestation, correct?
Yeah, so they are still largely a forested species, but they do have a little bit more flexibility there than bears do. Also, they have smaller home ranges, so less habitat required, so we can find them in areas that are maybe have a lot of agriculture or urban areas, as long as there's some forest mixed in.
Okay.
So yeah, a little bit more flexibility there. And then they also have faster population growth than the black bears just because of their reproductive cycle.
They can have up to like 6 kittens in a litter, right?
Yeah. And then they reproduce every year, typically.
When do they reach sexual maturity?
So technically, females can reproduce in their first year. That doesn't typically happen, but it can. Usually their second year, maybe about 50% of females will reproduce. And then by the time you get to them being 3 years old, usually over 90% of females are reproducing each year.
And with your study in Wisconsin, and maybe you know this for Ohio as well, but like I'm assuming that you got into the diet of a bobcat. What's some of like maybe the top 3 prey species that a bobcat would generally be targeting?
Yeah, so there was actually some research done here in Ohio that looked at bobcat diet by collecting roadkill bobcats and opening up the stomach and seeing what was in there. The most common species observed was cottontail rabbits.
Okay.
And that's kind of true across their range, that whether it's rabbits or hares or whatever lagomorph is in that area, that's going to be the mainstay of their diet.
Smaller, easy to catch, delicious,
abundant. Yeah,
I've seen some awesome like videos of cats chasing squirrels.
Yeah, same.
That's
Same.
incredibly.
The ambush.
Oh,
I love
and
watching an
just
ambush.
so agile how they can move up and down.
How quick they can go up and down a tree is
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, squirrels are definitely another important part of their diet. White-tailed deer are also a big part of their diet, particularly during the winter months. So
Interesting.
It's
As carrion or
that's something we don't really know because
Okay.
it's hard to tell. I mean, there's no way to tell from just the stomach of a roadkill animal, but that is some of the something that we think may be true, because there's going to be maybe deer that are doing not so well during the winter months.
it's a rough time of the So now, do they cache? Like I know that bear and you mentioned cougars, they will cache, meaning they will cover up their prey and kind of put it in a refrigerator for a midnight snack, right? Will bobcats cache on a larger kill like that?
Yes, definitely. So they, probably not with a cottontail rabbit. They might eat that in one sitting, but something like
That's
a deer,
lunch on a go.
certainly.
Yeah.
So, if you're not familiar with it, they cover up their prey and then they can leave it and come back the next day and uncover it and eat some more. So, so no food wasted.
Well, that's good.
So this one specimen we have in front of us, if we turn it a little bit, Abby, help me out.
Sure.
You can see some of the spotting on the underside. So different regions of the country they talk about different types of quality of the fur, but you can identify these cats by their spots, right?
Yeah, there has been some research that has done that. It basically used that to estimate population size. So you kind of have to have special setups with cameras that take pictures of both sides of the cats, but they do have distinct spotting patterns so you can identify individuals.
Nice.
They're a lot longer than a house cat. When I've seen folks submit to me a trail cam photo, a lot of times we have a good clean bobtail, and it's easy that way. We can say, hey, that's a bobcat, or you see the spotting. But also, like when they're weight-wise, they might be a little heavier, but they're long. Their front legs, their hind legs are tall. They make them look much, much taller.
Yeah. So they're typically, in Ohio at least, they weigh 15 to 30 pounds. The females are smaller than males. So they're not much bigger than a house cat in terms of weight in some cases. I think I've known some 15-pound house cats.
Right.
So,
yeah.
But yeah, exactly what you said. They're taller and lankier, and so do look quite a bit different than house cats in that way. One of the other things I always look for, again, in those pictures, trying to distinguish, is their feet are quite a bit bigger than a house cat.
Yeah.
So that's a good way to tell them apart.
Yeah, I just, excuse me, on Sunday I was deer hunting and I actually cut bobcat tracks, which is awesome. I think they're such an amazing creature. Why don't you, just for knowledge, if you're in the snow, mud, whatever, what is the difference between a bobcat track and a coyote track? And I'll even go to domestic dog, but there's something, it very jumps right out at you when you have a good track.
Before
and
Katie
really
gets in
helps
it,
you know.
the high school teams are real bad about discerning tracks.
Yes, they
yeah.
are.
I often see, high school or school associated, they have maybe their animal is a canine or a cat, and they have the wrong track all the time. But yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, so usually the first thing we look for is, are there nails visible in the track? Bobcats do have nails, but they're retractable. They most of the time don't show up in the track unless maybe they're on a really slippery substrate and they're trying to grab on. So that's one thing to look at. Canine tracks tend to be more of like a long oval shape, whereas the feline tracks are more of a round shape.
Yeah.
In total. And then the other thing I always look at is the heel pad. So in cats, the heel pad is kind of a trapezoid shape. In canines, it's usually going to be more of a triangle.
Yeah.
And of course, tracks are never that simple and clear, so it's good to have a few different things to look for and kind of weigh which is most likely.
Nice.
And you get a domestic dog, even some of our medium-sized dog breeds, their tracks are much bigger than even coyote tracks. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Very. I mean, you see a track that's like, holy cow, that's a huge track. That's a dog. That's 100%.
Yeah. That's a GSP.
Yeah.
That is not.
Yeah. The neighbor's lab has gone through the woods for sure.
Yeah.
So we're going to jump from bobcats to, are we doing Fisher?
I kind of want to jump into Fisher.
I'm pretty excited about this one.
Yeah.
I don't know a
Yes.
lot about them. I'm interested in
Well,
them.
it's showed up in the news a little bit more this past winter.
Yeah, they're only in certain parts of the state right now, right?
Yeah, so Fisher are kind of our newest returnee to the state out of our carnivores that were extirpated and are
They're
now
the
making their way
youngest.
back in.
Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So I think our first confirmed Fisher sighting in the state was 2012. So that's relatively
so not
recently.
long ago.
Yeah. And so they're coming in, again, from expanding populations in neighboring states, in this case, in Pennsylvania. So they're coming into northeast Ohio. Ashtabula, Trumbull County, those are the main places where we've seen them so far. But since that first sighting in 2012, they seem to be increasing pretty quickly. So
incredibly dependent on forested habitat.
yes,
Yeah.
I would say more so than really any of the other species we're going to
Agreed.
talk about today.
Agreed.
And they're coming from Pennsylvania. So do we have, you talked about the bear study where we have the females who are actually having young here. Do we have Fisher reproducing here in the state of Ohio?
Yeah, we do have some limited evidence of reproduction where we can actually say there were kits there, but then also just the steadiness of sightings in that Ashtabula and Trumbull County, and also they disperse relatively long distances, but nothing compared to like a black bear. So the fact that
Gotcha.
they're there consistently indicates to us that they're residents and reproducing.
And I would go on a limb and say the
Fascinating.
majority of Ohioans probably have very little to no knowledge on what a Fisher is, what family it's in.
describe that thing.
Let's get into a Fisher.
Weasel, right?
Yep. So
Mustelid,
they're in the Mustelidae family. So that's the same family as our weasels, as river otters, as badgers, and so they have that kind of same weasel look where they've got a long body and relatively short legs.
Pass that around.
Sure. Yeah. They do
Pretty
have
long tail on it.
So they spend a lot of time in trees. So they do have big feet that are adapted for climbing trees. So they're really good at that.
I mean, a real long tail.
Oh, yeah.
Compared to like a mink or anything. I mean, they have nice tails, but this is
Well, that
huge.
tail's the length of a mink.
Yeah, for sure. Are they normally this color or darker?
Yeah, they're typically brown, and then they kind of get black around the tips, so around their feet and the tail, and then sometimes at the front. And then kind of similar to what we were talking about with black bears, most of the time they have some sort of white markings on the chest.
What's a typical
See if-
diet
this one
for?
has some there.
Yep. He's got some patching.
Yeah. What's a typical diet for a fisher?
So they're going to be kind of similar to bobcats, where they're relatively generalist in terms of small and medium-sized mammals. Squirrels, definitely a big part of the diet for fisher.
And of the mustad family, is that the second largest, with the wolverine being the largest?
They're going to be smaller than, badger would be bigger than them.
I was going to say,
Okay.
and I mean, right there, it's laying next to another relative, the river otter.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so relatively it looks about the same size.
Yeah.
But different habitats.
Yeah, and they're again, I think the length on them can be deceiving, so they're going to be more about the size of a house cat, 10 to 15 pounds.
Oh, okay.
So,
Yeah, the length definitely threw me off on that. I'm looking at that thinking that's going to be more of like a 30 to 45 pound critter.
Oh, really?
There. Yeah, I guess that's where my mind was.
Excellent climbers, right?
oh yes, yeah,
Love to be up in trees.
Yeah.
And so, I not to talk about, we don't have pine martens here,
no.
right? But this is going to be more of a boreal species that we have coming down. Or is it
Right.
not a boreal species?
Well, so that's an interesting question. So they did historically occur here, and further south as well,
Okay.
further south in the Appalachian Mountains. So I think a lot of the information we have about them is from how they act in boreal areas, because by the time we started studying them,
That's
that
where
was
they
where
were.
they lived.
Yeah.
So, but I know a lot of research has been done in Pennsylvania as they've become reestablished there, and found that they're actually they can live very well in temperate forests as well. So that's a good sign for Ohio.
That's exciting. Yeah, I thought that they were just a boreal species. That's interesting to think about their life history we only know this about them because this is all we really have known. So that's cool.
Yeah.
I can imagine in your role, you want to know about all these species on the table and the sightings, but this one in particular. If someone sees a roadkill fisher, please be getting a hold of Katie, right?
Yes, yeah, definitely. So that's where
Our species reporting page.
yes, yeah. Please become familiar with it. tell us when you see them, because I do expect that they're going to continue to expand into the state, and that's what we want to be able to kind of track that and see where they're moving into, and how they're doing.
Yeah.
Look forward to that.
Yeah, and other ways you can. I have a story for river otter, but you can call your county officer, especially if you find a roadkill. And if you're finding a roadkill, you're thinking it's going to be an Ashtabula. What counties might people see or be on the lookout that we're driving down the road for fisher?
Yeah, so most of the sightings we've had so far are in Ashtabula and Trumbull County, Jefferson County. But again, they can be expanding out from those areas.
Yeah.
So as the years go on, I expect kind of any of our more forested counties, it'd be a possibility to see one.
That's awesome.
That'll be exciting to see what happens coming down.
Yeah. I think it'll be interesting to see if they make it into the southern part of the state, how much they can expand there, where we have a lot more forest down there.
For sure.
So we're going to jump to the next one, which
River otter.
River
Are
otter.
we doing river otter?
I
That
think
one
so.
has that was a very interesting life history to.
Well, yeah, we've got. So we talk about fisher and black bear and things that are more newer to the state, but river otter, we've kind of come full circle with river otters.
For sure.
Yeah, so river otter have kind of a little bit of a different story in terms of how they return to the state.
Absolutely.
So again, extirpated from the state, but in I believe the first reintroduction we did was in 1986, and so from the late 80s into the early 90s, the division did reintroduce otter into 4 watersheds in eastern Ohio.
Yeah. We brought them up from Louisiana and Arkansas, southern states.
Yep, that's right. And so a total of 123 otters were reintroduced, and the population has done incredibly well from that reintroduced population.
All 88 counties.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
statewide
Yeah.
from that.
And I think another kind of what I think is a pretty cool thing about that reintroduction effort is that we're not the only state that did it. So around the same time, many other states where they had been extirpated were reintroducing otter. So including there were reintroductions in Pennsylvania, in West Virginia, in Kentucky, and Indiana. So no doubt those reintroductions also helped
I didn't
our
realize
population.
that. I didn't
Yeah,
know
I
that
didn't know that
component to it.
Yeah.
I had read that they were delisted in the early 2000s.
Yep. Yeah. So we did a lot of different monitoring and continue to do a lot of different monitoring of our otter population. So just like some of these other species, started out with sightings to see where are they moving into out of those original release sites. And then as they became more common, started doing some actual surveys of them. So they did aerial surveys where they'd fly over rivers and look for tracks. And then in more recent years, we do bridge surveys where our staff go out to bridge sites across the state and again, looking for tracks. They walk upstream and downstream from a bridge site. And from that, we've been able to monitor the population really well and see it expand out, again, all 88 counties now. And so based on all those findings, they were downlisted or delisted in 2002. And then the first harvest season happened in 2005.
And that was a limited season. I mean, we had a very controlled unit for that, correct?
Yeah, so it was primarily in eastern Ohio where those original releases took place, and also where we have probably the best otter habitat in the state, as well as it was also in central Ohio, but again, further limited. So it's limited through bag limits, so limits on the number of animals that each trapper can harvest. And that continues to today. We still have a very limited otter harvest. It is now statewide. But we do also have required reporting for anyone who harvests an otter. And that in and of itself has become a really important monitoring method for us.
Yeah, so what you're referencing is the CITES.
I was going to say that.
I think, so for those of you that are watching this, you may have noticed with the bobcat and the river otters, we hold that up and pass that around. It's got a banded tag on it. That's referred to as a CITES tag. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, so CITES is the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species.
Thank
Hopefully
you,
I got that right.
I couldn't do that part. Put you on the spot there.
It could have gone either way.
Hey.
And so this is it's an international treaty that basically makes sure that trade in parts of wildlife is not negatively impacting endangered species. And so both bobcat and otter get tagged not because they themselves are endangered species, but because they're so-called look-alike species for other species that are endangered. So other lynx species or other otter species.
Yeah.
And so when we tag them with a CITES tag, that just tells anyone who's purchasing that pelt that that is in fact a North American river otter and it has been legally harvested.
Yeah, you look at the river otter and it's a big critter, very impressive, big web feet, river otter, right? Again, the naming of these just genius.
Hey, you know.
But you look at that, and then you look, I'll watch David Attenborough, and he'll be down in the Amazon, and they've got otters down there.
Yeah.
And the difference visually, there's a couple things you can pick up on, but the difference visually is that the otters in the Amazon are 6 feet long, the length of this table that we're talking across, as opposed to what is a general, regular-sized, normal, if you will, sized river otter.
Yeah, so probably the biggest that we see in Ohio is around 30 pounds. That would be a very large male. Females maybe around 10 to 15 pounds. So there can be quite a bit of variability, but that's about the range we're looking at.
And I mean, you touch that pelt, and it's like there's no question that thing lives in the water.
Yeah.
It's very, very dense and almost like oily. Almost has like an oily feel to it.
Yeah, you could definitely see how they can move quickly through the water with that fur.
Yeah.
The shine when I take, again, furs to educational programs, you pull out a river otter or a beaver or a muskrat and you lay them on a table next to bobcat, fox, coyote. Kids can see it. Like, do you guys notice? Well, these are shiny. That's what they often say about these more water species, and they do produce oils that help keep their coat in that condition. I mean, because they're in and out of the water every day of their life.
Yep.
Otters. So go back to the reporting. I do have a small story, not to go down a deep rabbit hole, but Fayette County.
Otter hole.
Yeah, otter hole. So Fayette County, we have bridge surveys. I've seen a little bit of sign, but never actually seen. I'd love to see a bobcat in Ohio. I haven't seen one physically yet. I've not seen a live otter, but last year I got a call as the county officer, which is a great way to report because we can put that information into the system. A gentleman called and he said he had seen a roadkill river otter on 35 in Fayette County. And being a game warden, I was a bit skeptical. Okay, and if he's listening or watching, I'm sorry that I was skeptical. I said, "Sir, have you ever seen a mink before?" And he cut me off right then. He says, "I know what a mink is, and this is an otter." I said, "Okay, can you send me a picture?" Great thing about cell phones now. He's like, "Yeah." He sent me a picture. I said, "Sir, that is 100% an otter." That's the first roadkill otter we've had in Fayette County. So I went and was able to collect that, and it's just it was a real big male. Unfortunately, sometimes roadkill are not in good condition. This one was not in good condition, but it was first time we've had a verified, confirmed that there is an otter in Fayette County.
When did you say that happened?
Last winter. So yeah,
okay.
so it would have been the
really?
winter. Yeah, earlier in 2025. It would have been January or February maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
I love them. Otters are great. I just wish I could see more of them. I don't have all the.
I've
otters
heard that they have a reputation for being very ornery.
Yeah, I think that's kind of true for all of those mustelids. All of the weasel species don't want to be in an enclosed space with them for sure.
Yes.
I mean, they're intense predators. A lot of the mustelids. Let's take the weasel for instance. Can predate on animals much larger than itself.
Yeah.
Right. Mink cause a lot of issues for folks who have chickens. If you have chickens anywhere near a creek, you might be worried about mink. So I mean, they are predators all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, so another thing with the river otter is that we do get a good amount of information, as I said, from harvest, but specifically from the harvested animals themselves. So in recent years, we've been asking trappers. It's completely voluntary, but our trappers are usually very happy to help out. We ask them to submit their harvested otters to us for monitoring purposes. And so from that, the main things that we collect is we take a tooth from the otter, and from that we can get the age of the animal. Also from the females, we get their reproductive system, and from that we can see how many are reproducing, how many kits they have, and so on. So, and that age information goes into an age at harvest population model, which is just kind of a computer-generated model, but it lets us see how harvest is affecting the population and how the population is doing in general. So if it's increasing, if it's decreasing, if it's staying about the same. So that's, again, just another tool in the tool belt to monitor the population
status.
I do want to talk a little more on otters. We've kind of touched on food sources for these other species, but it's going to jump into another thing about latrines. Because what they eat, it makes it another neat thing to look for when you're walking down the creek bank.
Absolutely.
So, Katie, if you want to get into that.
Yeah, so I guess kind of along the same lines as like a bobcat and a fisher, they're a generalist species as far as what they eat, but then their food's going to be based in the water. So fish is their main prey, again, we did have some research that was done, actually, same thing, using those animals that were harvested and donated that looked at diet of otters in Ohio, and they found that mainly they seem to be going after basically the abundant, slow-moving, easy-to-catch fish. So a lot of, yes, carp is the number one, carp, sunfish, catfish, things like that, things that are going to be easy to find. They did also find that during the summer months in particular, amphibians and crayfish as well are important parts of the diet, but fish are going to be the mainstay. And yeah, as you mentioned, the latrine sites, so they'll go to the bathroom at the same site over and again, and it's kind of a scent marking way for other otters to know that there's another otter
This is my
in the
area. Stay out.
Exactly, yeah. And so you can kind of see the evidence of what they've been eating at those latrine sites, fish scales.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of part of what we look for when we're surveying for otters.
I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask the question. But when we're talking about otters, I start to think about Pacific sea otters. And I think of that classic image of them coming up with a clam, laying on their back with a rock, and very resourceful in cracking the clam and then utilizing the meat from the clam. Has there ever been any kind of documented behavior like that from a river otter?
Not as far as I know.
Yeah, I didn't think so.
Yeah.
I didn't think so.
Similar. I see images online all the time, and I don't know if it's just, a old wives' tale, but holding hands.
I think
do they
that's sea
hold the
otters as
hands?
well.
That is
Sea
sea otter.
Yeah.
That's not.
Yeah.
We're not going to find hand holders in Ohio.
Not that I know of, but
No.
maybe.
But they are when they have a community or the female will have young, you'll see a family unit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep. Yeah.
Very social,
Yeah.
incredibly social, and communicating
And vocal.
constantly.
When
Right.
Constantly.
Yeah. So a lot of what we see in Ohio is that the family group, so a female with her young, and sometimes there could be a female young from previous litters as well around. In some places, males will also form groups. That seems to be something that occurs more often in coastal river otter populations. So
Interesting.
maybe
Okay.
not something that happens too often in Ohio, but it is a possibility.
So I feel like that's a great question, and I do not know the answer, and maybe the answer is group, but what is a group of otters called? So we do these pop quizzes.
Yeah.
They're the
Usually
worst.
someone-
I have a pop quiz. for all
Usually
of
someone
you.
knows the answer, but we're going to see
I
if it
actually
is
don't
different.
know.
I hate to put you on the spot with that, but I have no idea what a
No idea.
group of male or family unit of otters would be called other than a gathering. Or
You're just guessing.
grouping?
Yeah,
Oh,
you're just
totally,
making
totally.
things
Yeah, I
up.
have no
Totally.
idea.
Yeah.
No idea.
Is
yeah,
there?
I don't know. It feels
See, I
like
was right.
there's got to be a word for it, but I don't know what that is.
Jordan's going to leave here
I
today
be-
telling
I believe
everybody.
it's grouping and or gathering. Just
Okay.
so, yeah.
We can
So
make that
We've
official.
just made that decision
Oh
today.
my gosh.
You've got a pop quiz?
Yes, but I'm going to wait till after our final
our final species, which we have a representation right here. It's kind of a small one, but
It is a bit small.
It
it's
is a
bit
small-
It's a bit
You-
small.
You would call this a kit, probably. This has got to be a kit.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is definitely a small one.
So, castor candidans, right? Am I right there?
Yes.
Yes.
Yep,
so
you got it.
the American beaver, right?
North America's largest rodent.
Yep. Yeah.
So, Katie, if you give us a life history lesson, a little bit on beaver.
Boy,
Sure.
how much time we got.
Oh, well, I know.
Especially
I
with
know.
America.
Say,
Yeah,
It's America 250, and you just held that up and said, give us some life history.
I know. If people are familiar, I mean, that's why I said earlier with these fur-bearer species, the beaver, rich history in America. I
Absolutely.
mean, it was the reason we kept going west.
Yeah.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean, I think the thing that always stands out to me about beaver is we call them an ecosystem engineer. So, and I think that's probably what most people know about beaver, that they'll go in and they cut down trees. And so that in and of itself is changing the ecosystem. And then they also build dams. So that creates ponds.
keystone species.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So they are actually going in and changing the landscape. And the reason that they do that is there is to make. Sorry, I got lost there.
oh, it's like their safety.
They're damming up, and there
Yeah.
is a reason that they're doing that.
They need that water
So-
level to protect them.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
need the water level to protect them. They're chewing down trees. I think a lot of people are probably, this may be new information on why a beaver would spend so much time to chew a tree down. What is a beaver's diet?
Yeah. So they're unlike the rest of the species we talked about, they are an herbivore. So they're eating cambium, so the layer just under the bark of a tree. They also eat a lot of herbaceous vegetation.
Yep.
So I think what I was trying to get at there was that they create these ponds, but they're really creating wetlands. And so that's going to encourage a lot of that.
Creating a garden
Yes.
is what they're
Yeah,
doing.
yeah.
And then with the trees, while, as you can imagine, the side of a mature tree is not going to be as delicious as the top, the succulents of a willow tree or a birch tree. So generally speaking, they're chewing that tree to knock that tree over because the salad is at the top of the tree. So then they're taking that, they're getting smaller pieces of the new growth of limbs. And are they caching that?
Yeah, so they make these large cache piles that you might see them along a waterway, and typically they're kind of half above and half below the water, and they'll do that in the fall so that if that waterway freezes over, they can still access that food from underneath the
Yep.
ice.
So I have seen beavers, a few beavers in my life out and about in Ohio, but I think I've seen more evidence of beavers than I have the actual animal themselves.
100%.
Oh, sure.
From like the dam evidence and all of that. Is that typical? They're kind of solitary, scare easy creatures.
Yeah, so I mean, they do live in
Maybe.
family groups. So,
No.
Well,
I'm gonna follow up with a story.
Oh,
I'm gonna let you go, but I'll follow up with a funny story and funny
better
on
be
myself.
Or is
Oh,
it
well, now I'm
more,
excited
or you're
for that.
more likely to see evidence
It
before
probably
you
scared
see
him is what
the
I'm getting at, yeah.
species?
I think you're more likely to see evidence before you see the species just because they make such obvious
Yes.
evidence. So it's really clear when you see it. But yeah, they do live in family groups. So typically there's going to be more than one in the area. But yeah, they're not always easy to see the animal themselves, but
Right.
really anywhere for the most part in southern Ohio that you go and northeast as well. Anywhere that's
I
forested.
know in
in the
Cuyahoga
state.
Valley National Park, they have beaver marsh
Oh yeah.
for
yes.
that reason.
Yeah.
I mean, and mostly nocturnal, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mostly nocturnal. And they are, so in Ohio, there's not, I mean, maybe a bobcat or a coyote that's feeling real lucky could take a beaver. But there's not a lot of species in Ohio that would predate on beaver, but in other places there are. So they are still a prey species that's going to be kind of careful about making themselves too obvious.
Yeah.
So kind of unlike all the other species that we've already covered and that are represented on the table, with the beaver pelt, you just have the pelt. But we're missing a huge part of what makes a beaver, which is the big, wide, padded tail. And you talk about them being kind of solitary. So when I was younger, I was fishing in a stream, and the whole point was that we were waiting on a specific hatch to occur. We were fly fishing. And I'm sitting there on the stream, and it's getting dark, and all of a sudden, there's this huge splash right by me. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? And then it happens again. And I was convinced my younger brother was up in the woods behind me throwing rocks into the stream until it was just dark enough. The moon was up. I get on the water. I get this profile of something swimming across in front of me, and then I get the smack. They will smack their tail
Oh, cool.
on the water, kind of in disgust of you being in their area. And if you're not familiar, which I wasn't, it is absolutely terrifying when it happens to you the first time.
Yeah. Yeah, I have a similar. First time I experienced that, we were in college waterfowl hunting in a marsh in Wayne National Forest, and all of a sudden, I mean, loud.
Loud.
Yeah, we knew
Yeah.
what it was because we had been, made aware.
You had
that
that
beaver-
class.
Yeah, had that class. But, dude, when it happened, it was
I
something
won't tell
else.
you how long I yelled at the woods
At your brother.
at my brother.
Oh.
Yeah.
I was convinced I knew exactly what was going on.
To go into, you're like talking about the evidence of beavers. I love the beaver. I think it's a great animal. I think it's a fun species, and habitat making all day
Yeah.
long. But their evidence is sometimes problematic.
Yes.
From a wildlife officer standpoint, the dams oftentimes will back up water, especially being in an agriculture community, can back up water in the fields, can back up water on roadways. It can cause a lot of issues. They will demolish the corner of a cornfield.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
they'll tear it apart. And
Yeah.
and you might have planted a very nice tree along the creek that you love very
No.
much, and one day you wake up and it is in not good
Is
shape.
this a true narrative account for you?
I did have a beaver going after a weeping willow in my front yard.
Oh,
it's
weeping
fine. No,
willows.
and they're easy when you have trees. Again, for us, dealing with folks who have questions and comments, and hey, what do? I got this beaver issue. Beaver are easy to keep off of trees. It's just a matter of putting some sort of fencing around it, metal that they can't access that. Put some stakes in the ground, and then they're not going to mess with it.
Boy,
But
do they love
They're
a
not
willow tree,
climbers.
though.
they do.
I mean, they love a willow
yeah,
tree.
I would assume that willows are probably high on their food list.
Yeah. Any of those kind of those trees with thinner barks
Yeah.
are really
Yeah, you're usually not going to
favorites.
see them taking on a bur oak trying
No.
to get to.
no.
I think you talked about the tail being one of the things that sticks out in a beaver, but also the teeth.
Oh
the
yeah.
incisors and how they continuously grow. So they're
Yep.
continuously gnawing down their teeth.
Yeah,
have to gnaw down their
Yeah.
teeth. Otherwise, it becomes quite problematic.
Yeah.
And that's of all rodents, right?
Yep.
And then you also have what is it, like an orange enamel on those that kind of gives them away if you're looking at their skull?
Yeah. But yeah, that so they're always eating, and that's what wears down the teeth and keeps them healthy.
Yeah.
So, John, as far as the pelt is concerned, we had made mention that that's a smaller pelt.
Yeah.
So when you're looking at beaver pelts after they've been harvested, it's generally going to be a circle or an oval shape.
Yeah.
Is what you're looking for. And those sizes are kind of sized just the same as us going into a store and buying T-shirts. You have XL, double XL.
Oh, you're talking for the fur market?
For the fur market.
Yeah.
But
this is a really small beaver. I just want to point out for everyone. This is a really small beaver.
It's really kind of unique because you have guard hairs and then you have another layer underneath, and the layer underneath the guard hairs is
the layer.
Incredibly soft.
Yeah, and not to steal anything from Katie, but in this one, and this is a really dark beaver.
It is.
For a lot of the beaver that I encounter, these guard hairs, which I don't know how well the camera's going to pick it up, but these long, slick black hairs are often red in the beaver that I catch, or more brownish red. Is that something Ohio beavers, region-wise?
Yeah, I don't know if that's specific to Ohio or not.
Yeah. And then, but what Jordan's talking about is if we pull that back again, not going to be really
So
great
the guard
for
hairs are
camera.
over the whole pelt.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just part of the hair. But again,
this I hate to bend this thing up, but
Yeah.
this undercoat, and
That
give that a feel,
undercoat
Abby.
there,
It's
yeah.
like
it's like down.
soft as
I mean, it's just
softer than
soft as
cotton.
can be.
Yeah,
And that's usually if you see someone that has a beaver hat or beaver mittens, they're kind of utilizing that layer. What is that? I know the guard hairs. I don't know the secondary
Undercoat?
layer.
Just under fur.
Under fur.
Yeah, and if
Okay.
you think about the fact that they're active all year round, so even in the winter in our nice 20-degree weather that's happening right now,
Is it
they're
gonna make
still
20 today?
active.
Sounds like a tropical heat wave.
Yes, yeah. And on top of that, in the water. So that's why that under fur helps to protect them from the cold, because they're still a warm-blooded animal. They need to be kept warm.
So historically, then also it's apparel, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
the insulation factor of the beaver is just far superior to anything else that's on this table. And that's, John mentioned it, that was the frontier.
Yeah.
That's what kept
everybody
folks,
warm.
Well,
kept folks going west.
The other thing, like fashion, it was less about keeping people warm at that time, and recently in our current history, we talk about the show Yellowstone. We're talking about fashion sense.
Yeah.
So this undercoat, what they do is they grind that up and they make a felt out of it. And recently, with that show gaining popularity, cowboy hats gained popularity. So they would make beaver felt cowboy hats.
I
And
did
we
not
saw
know that.
Yeah, and we saw the fur market jump up
Really?
for the price of beaver, because that's what they were doing it. Now, with less cowboy hats maybe being sold, you'll see that market dip. So over time, and back in the day, that's what they were using them to make hats in Europe. So that's
Pop
really
culture
what drove it.
increasing the value of.
I cannot express. I didn't grow up trapping. Always had an interest in it. Like I think most outdoorsmen do. They think the frontiersmen. We get that idea.
Yeah.
When I started trapping beaver, I've learned a lot. I get wet a lot. But my favorite part about the beaver is you can utilize every part of it.
Absolutely.
That's what's amazing.
Yeah.
So the hide, the fur is worth something. And I know that might sound weird, but the tail, you can make leather out of that. You make wallets. You can eat it. I know that might throw people off. You can also eat the meat. You said that you use the beaver meat for different trapping scenarios when...
Yeah, pretty much everything, it seems, is attracted to beaver meat. And
Yeah.
it does, I like the smell. It smells good that it's from the castor, but it gets throughout the meat. So
Yeah.
And if anyone's freaking out when she says that, like, I can't believe that you would like the smell from the castor. What is the castor also used for that most people wear to smell good?
Oh, yeah. So at least historically, it was used in perfumes and really anything scented. So shampoos and things like that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a really nice smell.
And castor, lots of people probably have no idea what we're talking about. So maybe some of the
Right.
biology behind castor and what they use it for.
Yeah. So it's a scent gland that it's produced by a scent gland, and beavers will use it to mark their territory. So it's a very distinct smell, and you can actually, if you're in an area that has beaver dams or beaver lodges, a lot of times you can just smell it walking around because they'll make these mounds.
Castor mounds.
Yeah, and it's kind of a mix of mud and that castor, which they excrete through the gland and kind of mix in with the mud. So it's a way, again, to let other beavers know that they're in the area.
Yeah.
And when you think beaver dam. Like, what's the family component there? What's the reproduction cycle? Is that a family unit? Is that multiple different families in one big den? How is that broke out?
Yeah, so it's typically one family unit, so a male and a female, and then the young of the year, and then again with beaver, you might see female young from previous years that stick around for a couple of years before they go off on their own.
Yeah, so when I got into it, just like you said, it was kind of an adult onset education to beaver. But that was one of the things that I noticed first and right away is that you basically have two really big beavers, mom and dad.
Yeah.
And then you just kind of can go down that lineage. If you are observing them or trapping them, you can pretty quickly understand what component of that den you are engaging with.
How much do you think this kit probably weighed? Under 20?
Oh, absolutely. 15 pounds.
Yeah. I just want to throw that out because I cannot stress enough that this is not a very big beaver.
So I mean, I guess to that, they can get mighty big.
The largest we've ever caught was 69 pounds.
Yeah.
Good. Largest ones we caught last year were in the mid to high 50s, which is substantially larger than this. I mean, big animals.
And they get real big when you have set a trap way back on the last dam and you get two like that and you don't have a sled.
Oh, heavy. They get heavy. They drag them out.
They start to get into that 120-pound range pretty quick by the time you get back to the vehicle.
They're a really neat animal. Very neat animal.
I think one of my favorite things, and we're talking about the take of them, but also talking about, the fur component, but I've had them before and it's generally snowy. That's when the season is. It's a later season. But to clean them, you just take them and you just run them through the snow, and it's like washing your hands. You know, I mean, it will remove just about anything that was on that pelt, and I've always just found that fascinating. I don't really know you can't do that with a deer. You can't run a deer back and forth in the snowbank and it come out looking clean.
Yeah.
So
they. The only other thing I'll say about them is I hate that they get a bad rap for doing some damage here and there. Because as a waterfowl hunter as well, I love them. They make great waterfowl habitat. When you have beaver around, this is especially in the eastern part, wood duck habitat, all day long. So,
absolutely, yep.
So,
very cool species.
To go back to our reporting system, I'd love to just talk about it in depth for folks who are watching, listening. You don't report beavers anymore, right? We don't really take in, or we do?
No, we don't because we beavers have been established in the state for a long time. We also have a long-running aerial survey that we conduct for beaver each year, so we've got pretty good monitoring outside of sightings for them.
So let's walk folks through how they go to report.
Yeah, so if you go to our website, wildohio.gov, and on the left-hand side, one of the options is, I believe it says report wildlife or report
wildlife
sightings.
Reporting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yep. And you go there and it's an application where you can enter sighting information for, all 4 of these species and then a number of other species. So in the spring, we collect information on turkey poults through that, collect information on eagle nests. So it's not just furbearers on there, but we're talking about furbearers today. So
Yeah. But I mean, to your point, though, it really helps out our biologists. And you hit on this with the river otter, but there's a whole lot more that goes into the 2 species on the table that are regulated and open for trapping. It's not just because, we see some, so it must be okay. There's a whole madness to making this work and making sure that this is a renewable, sustainable resource for folks if they have the desire to trap and harvest, that they are allowed to. But we are very specific to rules and regulations. John, you can speak to this much more on what the parameters of that look like, what the season dates are, we're very careful to make sure that this is something that generations will continue to enjoy, regardless of what species it is.
You can also go on our Hunt Fish OH app and do report there under resources.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And kind of to your point, Jordan, the way that we monitor these species kind of evolves with time as they become more common in the state. So, for example, with fisher and with black bear, they're not so common at this point that we can use more traditional survey methods. There's just not enough of them for those survey methods to work. So sightings are the main way that we're monitoring them. But when we get into bobcats, so for a while that was the case with bobcats, but now they've become so common that we've added them as a main species on our bow hunter survey, which is one of the main surveys that we use to monitor our other fur bearer species as well. And so that's kind of becoming a more standardized survey method that we can use in addition to the sightings. So we never want to use just one thing. We like to have multiple methods of monitoring the species that we can kind of put together to get a full picture of what's going on. And then moving even further along to otter, so we have annual surveys that we do. We do also still rely on sightings, particularly in the western part of the state where they're kind
Not
of
as prevalent.
newly established there. And so to keep track of where they're hanging out there. But then, the information from the annual surveys as well as information from harvest add into our knowledge of the population. And then the other thing is, of course, research. So we've done a lot of research on otters over the years, especially when they were first reintroduced, putting monitoring devices on them and following them around. We've also done a number of research projects on bobcats as they became established in the state. And again, as you mentioned, now that bears are becoming more established, we've started a research project on them. So it follows a similar process for all of them.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah, it is.
Kind of important.
And it's successful. We have years of success with some of these species and hopes to continue.
Before we wrap up,
here we go.
That's right, John. Katie, you'll know all the answers to these, I'm sure.
No.
There's more than one.
No, you've jinxed me.
All right, here we go.
I just want to know if John and Jordan know the names for each of these fur bears that we discussed today, the names of their young.
No.
Well, yeah. So the kit,
Okay.
right? And then a kit.
For what?
A beaver would be
Beaver
a kit.
would be a
K-I-T.
kit. That would
right?
be
a kitten.
Kitten.
Right.
That would be a cub.
Cub would be for the bear.
I'm going to guess kit
It
I would
is.
also say, kit.
for the fisher, for those of us that
And for
can't
the
see.
otter.
And then for the otter, it would be,
Kit or a pup.
I must say,
Pup.
I was going to say kit. So
Good
There you go.
job.
Hey.
Look
Wow.
at you.
Look at us.
all
Look
that
at
worry.
us.
Folks, this is the first time he got them all right. What a way to start
You guys
2026.
You couldn't let me ride to that group and gathering thing.
That's
could
not
you?
a real
Like
thing.
that.
We're gonna figure that out for the next episode.
I thought
Come
we
back.
made it official. I
I
don't know
did
what they're
too.
talking
I know.
about.
I know. On this day.
Katie, I always like, especially when we have our biologists, because you guys don't get to the field and see everybody as often as like some of us. What if this opportunity to talk to the public? What would you? We've promoted the reporting, so that might be your thing. But what do you want to tell them?
Yeah, the reporting website is always my thing. I put it in every single presentation that I do. Report your sightings. They're incredibly important. You can upload pictures. That's really important because the main thing we rely on is confirmed sightings. So we want to make sure, not that we don't trust you, but it's really easy to get tricked sometimes with these species. So we want to be able to confirm that you're seeing what you think you're seeing. So that's all I can think of is the sightings website.
Yeah.
So with the sightings website, we didn't really talk about this, but you can attach photos.
Yep.
You can drop. We asked that you drop a pin
Location.
where you were,
Yes.
so that
Yeah.
we can see that location. But yeah, to your point, it can get confusing. So that trail camera photo is a lot of how we receive that, and that's worth its weight in gold because sometimes things can look as they do not appear as they look.
Yeah, and if
or
folks
seen.
aren't as familiar with some species as others, a mink is a lot smaller than your otter or your fisher, but a mink is going to be seen running around the banks of the creek just like you might see an otter. So, and I'll push again for wildlife officers. Call your county officer. You get a picture of an animal, especially on your trail camera, show it to your county officer, text it to us, and then sometimes I get folks who I don't know how to do the reporting, so I just do it for them. So there's that option as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess I'll add in, still talking about sightings, but where we talked about the Black Bear Research Project, that's been really the way that we've been able to capture bears so far is by people reporting to us that they have a bear that's been on their property for several years. So in particular, if you have those, particularly if you'd be welcome to us coming out and maybe trapping a bear and putting a collar on it on your property, we want to hear from you.
Yeah.
If I had a bear, I would call you because that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that? It really would.
Oh, yeah.
It would.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for coming in today. I learned a lot. I thought I knew a decent amount, but I learned a lot more today.
Yeah, it was good.
Before we wrap up this first episode, gentlemen, I want to go over a little bit about how our first year as a podcast went.
It has been a year.
Trials and tribulations.
We've learned some things.
It's
Couple things.
been an adventure.
We've come a long way, though.
We do.
We've come a long way.
We have a sign.
We have a sign.
I do have some fun stats that I pulled.
Oh, okay.
That you might be interested in. We had last year a total of 676 minutes of our voices out there.
Okay.
Okay.
So
I won't remember
if
that.
that's good, who knows?
It's all good. It's all
Maybe.
good.
We've been listened to in 25 countries.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
The
Thank
top
you.
3 being the U.S., Germany, and Singapore.
Singapore. All right.
Right.
Hello to our military service.
Yeah.
For sure.
Thank you.
652 cities.
All
top
right.
3 being Columbus, Cleveland, and Cincinnati.
That's good.
Which makes
That
sense.
is a good
baby.
sign.
You know? Would you like to take a guess at how many downloads we have?
No. 20,000.
That's probably too many.
Yeah, it is.
We're not that cool.
Humble
said take
humble
a
yourself, Jordan.
Let's strive.
6,000. 4,000?
Okay, if this price is
What's-
right,
what
then
was that?
John wins.
Price is right. Well, if you should have told me we were playing Price is Right rules.
6,520.
Thank
Sweet.
you.
Yeah.
Our most popular episode. Want to take a guess at that?
I know which one was my favorite, so
Your favorite or our most popular?
I've just.
We should talk about favorite.
Well, she just said most popular. That's where I would jump off on how I would say.
It's probably your favorite anyway.
But then we had some.
I'm going to say
Brutus Buckeye
EHD.
might have- Oh, you think?
I'm going to say that the EHD tip in Josh Shields' episode was our most popular.
No, it wasn't.
Yep.
Josh, good for him.
Yeah.
Look at him go. Hi, Josh.
What was your favorite?
My favorite, I think, was the Rich when we talked about Saw Guy.
Yeah, and Abby Didamasi with the amphibians.
Yeah, I learned so much. I've learned so much. I'm not a huge angler, and I didn't realize all the work that we put in to make Saw Guy, how that all works out. It was just interesting. I kind of lost myself in the interview, just like sitting there listening.
Yeah,
So,
that was a good one.
What about you?
You know, I think because it incorporated the visual component and just being able to get out of the office a little bit, the Cleveland one, the Cleveland
that was a good
movie with Garrett and then Nicole.
Yeah.
But Garrett in particular, like the moment he started, I was just
We
kind of
should have
like,
just hit record.
I'm not needed here.
Yeah.
And I just got to sit back and listen to someone that passion coming out of him and just the knowledge
100%.
base. I look forward to having him back on at some point in time. So
that's why we like having you guys on, Katie.
Yeah.
The people who are like. We just
and we're
kinda-
also talking about last year. So for this year, it's
We're number one.
clearly this one.
Yeah,
Because
obviously.
we've established so many good things like grouping and gathering already. So
Yeah.
we're
This podcast has been a huge group effort.
well, wait a minute.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
What's your favorite?
Oh,
Yeah.
God. I think I agree with John. I learned so much about the fish and just having Abby come on and talk about amphibians in the way she was
It was
passionate
good.
about
play
it.
frog sounds.
It was good.
Frogsicles. She talked about frogsicles.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
She did the frog sounds. I learned a lot about Saw Guy.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I thought that one was really cool.
Yeah, are you talking about the behind the scenes, the team?
Yes,
Oh, yeah.
We're out here,
yes.
you hear our voice, but it's been growing.
We have
it's been
a team that makes us look this good.
they try hard.
It takes a team. It does take a team.
It takes a Meredith, a Jeremiah, a Carolyn,
It takes a whole lot, but those 3 in particular, we got to tip our hat to
Yeah.
because there's a lot that goes into it. I mean, just something as simple, not as simple as setting up a studio. There's
Right.
a lot of conversation and thought that goes into
Where
that.
the sound.
The editing part has got to be
We mess up a lot.
absolutely horrendous.
Yeah,
we
mess up a
must
lot.
have for 678 minutes of us talking that actually I'm guessing made it. There's probably another 300 of sorry Jeremiahs coming from all 3 of us.
or oops, can we do that again?
Yeah. So
But now that we're on video, we can't hide that.
So I think Carolyn is on the video production side of things. Meredith is a producer for us. And then Jeremiah is on the audio side of things. I think Carolyn is just now going to start to really embrace. We gave her a short little view of 4 IMAX movie premieres. But now that we're in the studio, we've got these video angles. I have a feeling
She's gonna love us
really
so
gonna
much.
love to hate us.
We
here.
haven't really discussed it, but we've talked about it. In our planning process, we hope to get back outside the studio. We could have some episodes this year
Got
that
some
we
things
want.
Traveling
coming.
around.
Got some
Yes.
things. I'm actually
Great
really
visuals.
looking forward to. We're going to go up to McGee for the biggest week in birding, and I am excited about that one.
Mm-hmm.
I really am. I haven't been for quite a while, and I'm excited to see the warblers again.
A lot of sights and sounds on that trip. There
Yeah.
will be.
Yeah.
For sure. I did hear through the grapevine that we are being gifted
Oh.
a 2-minute,
Oh no.
shall we call it a reel?
We have 2
So-
minutes of sorry Jeremiah.
In our ears, we're about to get sound.
Maybe?
Is it going to come through that way?
I don't know.
I don't know.
Again, it takes a team. So right now, Meredith, Jeremiah, and Carolyn are in the background making
Laughing
something
at
work,
us.
and I can hear something coming in.
Yeah.
Okay.
We're hypersensitive to Jeremiah. Thank you, Jeremiah. Shout out. And his editing that goes into this because apparently it's painstaking. So sorry, Jeremiah.
Sorry, Jeremiah. Third time's the charm.
Sorry, Jeremiah.
Waiting on that.
There's not 2 minutes of sorry, Jeremiah. Are there?
All right, good.
Chainsaws.
Are you going to introduce us?
No, I'm not going to introduce you.
Wow.
Jeremiah.
You ready?
Time, Jeremiah.
Jeremiah.
That's it, Jeremiah. I don't know how that
Are you ready,
happened.
Jeremiah?
Go ahead, Jeremiah. You've had all day to prepare for this.
No, we have several people.
Sounds like you, Jordan.
Marketing coordinator.
John Kaufman, Bay County Wildlife Officer. Jordan
Oh,
Phillips,
man.
Archery Program Administrator. Special guest, Mike Irvin.
Chief Kendra Wecker. Rich Zweifel.
Our upland bird biologist, Mark Wiley.
Deer biologist.
All the great guests.
Clint McCoy.
Today, we are going to be talking with Jim Quinlivan. Today's guest is Jamie Immer.
Abby DiTomasi.
Mike Gregg from TIP, which is Turned Into Poacher Program. Our next guest is Josh Shields. Clint McCoy, deer biologist here with the Ohio Division of Wildlife.
Heavy hitter.
Earth
Heavy
Director
hitter.
of the Ohio Department of Natural Resources.
Thank you very much. Mike DeWine, Governor of Ohio.
Hey.
And my boss, Jen Dennison.
Jeremiah, my headphones
Wait.
sound weird.
Are those mine? Are these plugged in already?
That was me. I'm sorry.
You can talk to me.
Did that work? No. Okay.
This is how it always goes. We start, and I do poorly, and then we get there.
Friday chaps.
2, 3, and 4.
Honest.
What am I trying to say here? So,
Like muffled, not crisp. We rambled on too much about.
Did you try the dill pickle lemonade?
What is probably your favorite fish?
That'll make the reel.
Sorry, Jeremiah. Kind of a full episode.
We're live.
We're recording.
We're not doing this.
Fantastic.
I don't know where you came in, Jeremiah, what we were talking about.
Are we off today?
Oh, jeez. Thanks, Abby.
I have so much to
hopefully,
say
Jeremiah,
right
you
now.
can get Abby asking that question before.
Okay.
You're doing great.
How'd it sound, Jeremiah?
Not like it sounded when we were there.
I think it sound okay. Sorry, Jeremiah.
No, he just wrapped up his story pretty quick.
Jeremiah, we're going to cut that.
We're not cutting it out. We're going to keep it. That is a wrap.
That's fantastic.
Oh my god.
That is
good.
fantastic.
That was good. I love it. It really shows what there is going on.
That's absolutely.
really
You guys
should.
get the finished, perfect product. There's a lot that's not there. That's not perfect.
Thank you to the podcast team.
One more. We got Oh,
We're
got
so good at this.
1 year under the belt. We're gonna just keep moving forward.
I'm looking forward to this year. This video component to it. If you're listening to this, we'd love for you to be able to see this as well. We're going to try and bring some visuals in. We got a list of great guests. Katie kicking it off right out the gate with Furbearers. Excited for that. We're going to have some steelhead coming. We got a lot more in the hopper.
We'll learn a little bit more about the officers this year, I think.
Yeah.
Okay.
What
We're
they
hoping
do.
to.
And
Yeah.
Yep. And then looking forward to some outside folks as well and doing some engagement. And John, like you said, getting it on the road a little bit as
for
well.
sure.
So that reel was fantastic.
I know.
Yeah, that was
I think
good.
Well,
that
thanks
was the
for the
first
folks
time
who
we
are
heard all
listening.
of that, so you got real-time reactions from all of us.
Yeah.
Katie, we're
So-
sorry in advance.
That was amazing.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the wrap-up of 2025, as well as our first guest for 2026, Katie Dennison, our Furbearer biologist. Don't forget to subscribe to the Wild Ohio podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. Make sure you tell your friends and family, and we hope to see you outside.
Thanks.
See you out there.
See ya.